Right, welcome back to Turdtowns, the channel that covers some of the lesser known places in the UK. For good, but usually for bad reasons. Today's video is a bit of an anniversary video and almost a new series, so we'd love to have your feedback on the best way to do this new series. But anyway, for our 20th video anniversary, we are revisiting Somerset. This was the location of our very first video, and I just wasn't happy with how some of that turned out. But more importantly, we wanted to see if anything had improved, or perhaps there were some new towns worthy of being inducted into the Turdtowns Hall of Shame. This video is not happening due to laziness or anything like that. I have about 4 videos waiting to be edited. This is just a trial run to see if it works. So let us know down in the comments what you think, and don't forget to hit like, share and subscribe to help Turdtowns thrive. Number 8. Shepton Mallet. We start off our list with a brand new entry. Shepton Mallet is a market town with a population of 9,600. Shepton has been famous for a couple of reasons over the years. Most notably, there used to be a prison here which shut its gates in 2013. That prison once housed Ronnie and Reggie Kray. Now the prison is a museum. I personally vote for reopening the prison to deal with all the troublemakers in the area. Shepton was also the home of a BBC TV documentary which called Turn Back Time the High Street, where they investigated different shops throughout the years. Charity shops and vape shops did not make the cut. The High Street is such a dreary place, it doesn't help that you feel like you're walking down a piss-soaked alleyway. The market area would have been important, but now it's just a reminder that it's not anymore. There's a big ugly theatre here, which has long been empty since about 2011. Now that's a long time. I guess the people of Shepton are uncultured nowadays. Anyway, don't bother coming down here, it just feels eerie. Shepton Mallet High Street has suffered since the massive Tesco store was built up on the hill, and it is a massive one. There are some other shops here too, including the worst furniture shop I've ever looked around here. Seriously, who buys this stuff? On the whole, Shepton just feels scruffy and probably hasn't held any importance since the prison, or before that, the railway station closed. It's in the middle of nowhere, but it's not big enough to support itself. Property is still below average in price here, and its crime rate is actually okay, but that's probably because one of the few remaining police stations in Somerset is located here. Or maybe, perhaps, the locals are just too thick to realise that the prison is closed. Speaking of property, almost all the houses here are in need of a good clean and a lick of paint. If someone could figure out a cheap way to do this, there's a lot of money to be made in Shepton. And whilst you're spraying down the houses, feel free to spray the people down too. Many of them haven't had a good shower since the prison closed. Number 7. Glastonbury. Once again, occupying the number 7 spot is Glastonbury, the world famous town with a population of 8,200. I have a real love-hate relationship with Glastonbury. On the positive side, it's by far the prettiest town on our list, and tourists actually still flock here to visit its famous Torrent Abbey. But there is another side to Glastonbury, the side which has the 4th worst crime in Somerset, and a rate which has actually worsened since our last visit. Glastonbury is now close to having the 3rd worst crime in the county, and the people here are just a different breed. It's basically a bunch of hippies who've moved from London and they lay about waiting for the next Glastonbury festival. In the meantime, they run shops in witchcraft, crystals and odd-smelling soaps. There must be a market for this stuff though, and Glastonbury serves Somerset Harry Potterheads well. Away from the main street and tourist parts, it is pretty shabby. There's plenty of abandoned factories and old industry buildings, and next to the derelict buildings is huge amounts of people who have opted for van and caravan life, a cheaper way to live for sure. All the Londoners in Glastonbury have swelled the average house price from $259,000 to a whopping $314,000 in just a year, a huge increase. I'm not surprised so many people have stopped living in actual houses here. There's a massive van community here, so perhaps they found a better way of life, a more fulfilling way of breaking away from the bill-paying monotony. Good for them, but it sure makes the streets of Glastonbury look like an absolute state. Number 6. Chard. Okay, the second place which featured last time, and it somehow moved up 2 spots and got worse. And I really didn't want to have to come here again, it's so out of the way to visit the 13,000 people that live here. It's basically in Devon, being only 6 miles from the border. On the surface of it, Chard seems like a very normal small town. Perhaps it even seems nice. But there are some serious problems going on here behind the scenes. First of all, the high street is just nothing. No shops that anyone would ever find useful. There's only really 2 points of interest here. The random water gully they decided to run alongside the main pathway, which is just hilarious when annoying brats trip into the water. I was one of them last year. And the second thing is the Wetherspoons, which is a converted cinema. Chard itself is mostly fine, but it's looking very tired these days and it's verging on depressing. They're actually starting to see boarded up houses and flats here, which you just wouldn't expect to see in this part of the world. But at least they've got a brand new leisure centre. On a working day, scruffy layabouts hang around the high streets with nothing better to do but spit a never-ending puddle onto the ground in front of them. And that's where we're heading here. The people of Chard are the reason for this inclusion. The crime rate has actually gotten worse here. It's now 78 in 1,000, which makes it the most crime-ridden small town in Somerset. Most of the problems seem to be caused by the excessive drinking culture from these poor rogues. And despite Chard being the birthplace of motorised flight, they're all just trapped here. Maybe boot out Wetherspoons and bring the old cinema back. Just 2 weeks ago, 5 people were arrested in the small hours of the morning for violence, which again, you wouldn't expect in a place like this. I think everybody is drunk. Last time we visited here, the average house price was 226,000, but now it's shot all the way up to 271,000. That is insane for the most violent small town in Somerset. So the crime's got worse, the price has gotten worse, the buildings have gotten worse, and most importantly, the people are still the same bored, aggressive drunks, except their behaviour is getting worse. Chard is a real Somerset surprise, like biting into an apple full of worms. Number 5, Taunton. Falling 2 spots from last year, it's Taunton, the large town with a population of 61,000. Taunton is the market town of Somerset, and therefore it is the most important, and I have to say I personally do like the place. There's nice buildings here, and the main street is laid out well alongside cobbles. It feels like a place with history. Unfortunately, it does look like the history's getting very tired after our last visit. It doesn't help that the massive Debenhams here has closed down since last time, and it is a massive eyesore covered in questionable graffiti. It sounds like this building will eventually be turned into 69 flats, and they will probably be quite nice overlooking the river, but for now it remains a mess. Luckily there are still some decent shops here in the town, and it is still worth a visit. Taunton had the 3rd worst crime in the county, and it's increased a lot since our last visit, jumping from 100 to 112 in 1,000. The average house price here is 281,000. If you can swing that in a nice part of the town, I'd say go for it. There's lots of nice places on the doorstep, and if you ignore the crime here, it is okay. Much the same as our last visit. Number 4, Weston Supermare. Alright, some major positivity for this list. Dropping from the number 1 spot from last year, it's Weston Supermare, the town of 84,000. See, we can do it. Although Weston isn't quite there yet to be removed altogether from this list. It might be one day. I've been to Weston a few times for this channel, so I will keep it brief. It's a seaside town full of brummies and grey-haired boomers on depressing days out. But Weston can't help that. It has problems with high levels of drug addictions, poor choices and failures. But that's enough about your old man. The main shops are still not the best, but it's somehow less depressing here than the 4 other Somerset towns yet to come. The key word here is potential. The Victorian buildings could still look nice. The main street is well located, and the Sovereign shopping centre is actually really nice inside. This big display here used to be all animated. What happened? Can we bring that back? Anyway, this is a big area which doesn't need any work done on it. Just find a use for it. Last time out, I criticised the building of a big complex at Dolphin Square because all the shops and restaurants were empty. And it's gotten slightly better. This Costa wasn't here last time. The smashed up, rotting department store finally has planning permission to become flats and offices, which is still better than a boarded up carcass of a shop. Also, the old Odeon cinema will not be abandoned, and it's been purchased by another cinema company. That's great news for the people of Weston. And most importantly, a major Weston landmark has just been compulsory purchased by the council. Burnbet Pier is now owned by Weston Council, and they will hopefully look after it properly. Although from the look of it here, there really isn't much left of it to look after. But it is great that Weston is now in full control of its Victorian pier. Random observation too, but there seems to be a lot of positivity around the football club right now, which is good for the community. I think the owner wants them to be a league team one day. Yes, there's still a fair bit of crime and poverty here. If something stinks, we're going to tell you, but if a turd is cleaning up its act, we'll also tell you. House prices here are 272,000, which is in line with increases in inflation. Nothing too dramatic for Somerset. Crime rate has actually improved here since our last visit. It's now 92 in 1,000. So Weston now has the 5th worst crime in the county. Excellent, good work all round. It's nice to see that not all Turdtowns are destined for the sewer, and keep up the good work, Weston. Number 3, Highbridge. Alright, it's a completely new entry to the list. Highbridge is a town joint to another town called Burnham-on-Sea with a combined population of 19,000. Burnham's actually alright though, and we're only focusing on Highbridge here. Highbridge is a former market town until they smashed it down and built a housing estate. It was deemed so rubbish here that the town council was absorbed by Burnham Town Council. Locals protested about the joining of the names and vandalised signs saying Burnham and Highbridge. Presumably that's because nobody would ever want to be associated with Highbridge. It has to be one of the most pointless places in existence. It's near the sea without actually being on the sea. Instead you get the stench without any of the fun. Everything is brown and dreary. The main street barely even exists except for a place for the local smackheads to hang out. It's a few shops and a bunch of mould-filled flats. Almost everybody from Highbridge is dodgy or used to be involved with something. It's an unwelcoming place which you can't wait to leave. I don't live too far from Highbridge, but I've never had to go here for anything except to use the tip, which pretty much sums the place up. The only positive is that the station is extremely accessible, being smack bang in the middle of the place. Although don't hang around on the platforms for too long, you'll be harassed by some of the local louts. The only other positive is the housing is cheap here, and it's likely one of the only places that young people can afford in Somerset at an average of 227,000. It's one of those places that they've stacked up loads of cardboard townhouses recently on the outskirts, as the land is unwanted because it's on a floodplain. Nobody actually wants to be here, and the people are essentially forced because it's one of the only affordable places in the county. Number 2, Bridgewater. Once again, residents of Bridgewater can breathe a sigh of relief for the second year in a row, because Bridgewater finishes in second place. It's the town of Bridgewater with a population of 47,000. It's hard to find positive to say about Bridgewater. It's a nothing kind of place, yet it's still pretty big. It's extremely dreary and just plain horrible in and around the town centre. But it was not actually that abandoned, so props for that. I have to say though, in these tough financial times, I've never seen that an Aldi store has shut its doors. I guess there's a first for everything. All the buildings are constructed from filthy red bricks which provoke thoughts of the Victorian times, chimney sweeps and anger. The place just needs a good old clean. The Bridgewater Hospital is a massive eyesore which has been laying derelict since 2014. But news did break a few months ago that Bridgewater is getting some levelling up money and they'll be spending £20 million on this building. It's set to become a health and social care academy. Now, whilst that isn't the most exciting use of funds I've ever heard, it's probably the most intelligent use of funds. The people of Bridgewater need jobs and education, and the country is crying out for more people in this profession. I can't believe someone did something right in Bridgewater. Stick around for number 1 if you want to see how not to use levelling up funds. Houses are cheap here at $238,000 because nobody wants to live in Bridgewater because it has such a bad reputation in the county. The main reason for the high finish on today's list is that Bridgewater leads the way for crimes committed in Somerset with an average rate of 131 in 1,000, and that does seem to be getting worse year on year. There's dodgy people hanging about all over the place here, it's just not a happy area to be in. It's also home to the first or second worst motorway services in the country. It smells awful here and the parking is really bad for our services, it just needs knocking down. But at least it gets Bridgewater some national press each year, and it's the only time Bridgewater will ever win first at anything. Number 1, Yeovil. Climbing all the way up from 4th place to the number 1 spot is Yeovil, affectionately known as Yeovil by the locals. And now I can see why, because this town of 45,000 hate where they live so much. Last time we visited, some of the main streets were starting to become pedestrianised and it was a mess and there were lots of boarded up buildings. Well, guess what? It's got a whole lot worse since our last visit. It looks like an actual war zone. What a dump. I get that work has to be undertaken sometimes, but this has turned into a long drawn out messy saga. Since 2019, they've been trying to fix the main street up with one contractor going bust and costs spiralling out of control. Figures are quoted at around 24 million. The project has been handled woefully. Whilst this has been going down, half the shops on the street have closed, so if it ever does get finished, it will be a shopping street of dozens of empty shops, therefore rendering the entire project a waste of money. During this time, an entire shopping centre has been abandoned too, and even once the work has been completed, the buildings are still going to be ugly 60s style crack dens. It just gets worse the further you walk. Abandoned decaying buildings everywhere. The place is vile and it's one of the worst places I've ever been. They also tried to improve the theatre, but in another building saga, they ran out of money after costs spiralled and that sits closed until further notice. The locals are now calling for the building project to be abandoned because businesses suffered too badly during the pandemic and the project has failed. Councillors say too bad, it's too late. Outside of the town, there's a big divide between rich and poor people, which adds to the unfriendly atmosphere. On average, house prices have increased from 225,000 to 241,000 due to some of the nicer outskirts. Yeovil also now has the second worst crime rate in Somerset County, rising from 118 to 128 in 1,000 as a ratio. It's about the same as the city of Leicester. They also used to have a football league team, the only one in Somerset, which offers some cheer on a Saturday. But now they've been double relegated and they play 2 leagues below the football league. And in typical Yeovil town fashion, ownership structure has been a mess. Nicknamed the Glovers due to gloves being made in the town, last week news broke that the glove factory has entered administration. It's just every week there's news of buildings getting abandoned, be that the bus depot, the cattle market, or even apparently the town council site next. So for the fact that Yeovil has been completely destroyed by the decision makers, this once successful town is now on its deathbed. It's a toilet and it's got a mass stuck in the U-bend that grows with mould and extra turd as the days pass. Yeovil is a toilet begging for a plumber to come and put it out of its misery. So that's the Somerset 2023 edition. As I said, let me know what you think about revisiting places in the comments. In the winter, filming days are really short and we've got to find ways to make this work. Is 1 year too soon for a place to improve? Let me know down below, and don't forget to hit like, share and subscribe to help Turdtowns thrive.